See, history isn't inevitable. As Dr. King said, the moral arc of the universe is long, but it bends toward justice. Things can be different, but they will be different mainly if we join with God and envision a new world and agitate for it the way Isaiah and Mary did. So imagine with me the American story. If our country from the first had a bias toward the last. By now we know that there's more than one origin story of America, one at Plymouth with the Pilgrims, the other Jamestown with enslaved people of African descent. It didn't all have to be the way it did. The Pilgrims, you know, were not the elite of English society. You don't leave home in search of freedom and a better life if you're already at home enjoying a really good life. Those early settlers were Christians, but they weren't the landed gentry. They were from working class people on the fringes of society, and they were fueled by a vision of a new Jerusalem and a faith in the God of the last that came from texts like these. So what if our nation's forebears in Plymouth and Jamestown had taken up the Bible's bias toward the last? Think we would have needed a 1619 project to tell us a different view of our country from the point of view of the last? Speaking of what ifs, what if the church in the antebellum South hadn't read the Bible to justify slavery? What if John Broadus, one of the founders of the Southern Baptist Theological Seminary in Louisville, Kentucky, had not defended, prayed for, and supported Jefferson Davis and the Confederacy in the name of protecting civilization, thus putting Baptists on the side of the oppressor from the beginning? What if, during Reconstruction, after the Civil War, the church had supported 40 acres and a mule that would have given land and opportunity to freed slaves? What if, in Dallas, Texas, a city which in the 1920s had 1 out of every 3 eligible white men as a member of the Ku Klux Klan, what if the church in Dallas had stood against white supremacy and demanded that our city be a home equally for everyone? What if our white city fathers had not made an accommodation with black pastors to keep the civil rights movement from bringing real and lasting change to our city, and instead traded it for a surface peace? Well, that was then, but this is now. And happily, we have the same chance in our day to make things right that we have always had. Today, we can reclaim the vision of Isaiah and rename the desolate lands in our city. Today, we can intercede with Jesus to bring out the best last. As Councilmember Thomas has shown us today, through the city's first real accounting of racial equity, decisions were made in this city in the past to cut off parts of Dallas from being fruitful. And those parts were neighborhoods populated by Black and Latino people. It's just the truth. Much of the land in southern and western Dallas is still unmarried, to use Isaiah's image. And it's unmarried because it was cordoned off by highways built deliberately to prevent encroachment of black neighborhoods into white. It is unmarried because of bank redlining policies that prevented black renters from getting mortgages, becoming homeowners, and building generational wealth. It is unmarried because all the landfills and dumps and toxin-producing businesses were permitted to be located there, something we would never allow to happen in our North Dallas neighborhoods. And it is unmarried because public transportation was not linked to schools and jobs and services, because public schools and public libraries and public parks and community centers and code enforcement and on were neglected. Even today, demography is destiny for too many in our city. Do you know that there is a difference in male life expectancy in Dallas, Texas, in a 2-mile stretch from 75215 in South Dallas to 75205 in Old East Dallas? The difference, 26 years. How can that be? Doesn't have to be. And this is the kind of thing leaders like Councilmember Thomas are working to reverse, because things are not fixed and final. Not in the spirit of Isaiah, and not if Mary still stirs among us. Not if the risen Christ is still loose in our midst, and he is. Our city leaders go to church, you know, and thank God they are seeing now what we are seeing now, which somehow once we did not see. But we're reading the Bible, and we're learning to read it as it was intended, with a bias toward the last. So just imagine with me the joy of God when all our neighborhoods know themselves as my delight is in you, and married. And when we taste the best wine together last. If we can imagine it, we can achieve it. If we can dream it, we can become it. Because that we is not just you and me. It is you and me and the God with a bias toward the last. Amen.